Hello, and let's return to the game I like to call I'm Not a Witch or Even Superstitious, I just happen to be inherently curious about astrology and astronomy and different types of religions and spiritual beliefs, and really into baking and cooking and sewing, and also culturally linked to both Baba Yaga and celebrating the Lunar New Year. Jokes aside though, for the last 2 years, I've been keeping a tradition of drawing 3 of my original characters celebrating the Lunar New Year's as a way to bring my own culture and memories of celebrations to the forefront of some of my artwork and to share in these celebrations with you. February 10th marks the start of the Lunar New Year for 2024, and we say goodbye to the beautiful year of the rabbit, my year, and welcome the year of the dragon. If you were born in 1964, 1976, 1988, 2000 or 2012, you were born in the year of the dragon, so it is your year to celebrate. Or if not celebrate, be prepared, because the general consensus of predictions for the dragons out there is that this year, change and opportunity is coming your way. But before I get too far into talking about all this, I would like to address the 3 characters that will be featured in this year's celebratory art piece. Last year, I featured 3 characters that have really just become an iconic part of my channel as a whole: Merilith, Ezra, and Isegwyn. This year, I decided to do some of my actual playable characters, not just NPCs. I did flop around between the many characters that I have, but I finally decided that we were drawing Fing, Exodus, and Io. Fing was the most obvious choice of them all. Not only is he taking a major front seat in my D&D experiences so far this year, he is also a kobold, which is a species distantly related to dragons, and it would be just ridiculous to not include him in the celebration of the year of the dragon. The second character I chose to include was Exodus, my cyber elf monk, whose features are heavily inspired by makeup artist May Pang, who might be better known as Microsoft. May is a huge inspiration to me as an artist, obviously, but she is also a first-generation Canadian of Malaysian descent, and I am a first-generation American of Malaysian Polish descent. So I have a little bit of this second-hand vicarious pride for her openness and self-love journey. Obviously, I don't want to speak on behalf of all of Malaysia or those of Malaysian descent, but in my experiences, being open about struggles is not something that is very culturally intuitive. And May is very open about her sobriety journey, her body image, and about how she has learned to love herself, and I find that very inspiring and also very humbling. It also felt very fitting to include my character inspired specifically by a Malaysian content creator into my celebration of the Malaysian side of my family. And last but certainly not least in the lineup is Io, who almost took second place to Calliope or Inkashti. Both Calliope and Inkashti have received a lot of love, redraws, fan arts, and a version of Inkashti was technically my first Lunar New Year's drawing ever. Io has also received a lot of love over this past year, especially when I cosplayed her at the Renaissance Fair, but Io is literally named after a moon. I mean, yeah, it's the wrong moon, but you know what, it's a moon, it's close enough. I did want to include a lion dance character in this year's drawing because while I was looking around on Pinterest, I came across this art that is so stinking cute. I love the way that the artist has personified the lions like little dogs. And so Pinterest is quite bad at giving the artist credit, but I did manage to track them down. The artist is Choi Tse, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're an artist as well as a lion dancer based in Australia, and they have a webtoon called Under the Lion, which is a collection of mini comics that talk about the various shenanigans that happen as part of being a lion dance team. And who better than a professional lion dancer to know the best way to draw these cute little guys? Although it is a little amusing to imagine my lion drawing as if it had actual lion dancers inside, because they sure would be doing something. Besides obviously having the lion dance featured, I wanted to actually focus a little bit more on the clothing this year. Whenever I get close to the Lunar New Year, there's always like a tiny little itch in the back of my mind begging me to make and wear traditional clothing, but I never do. I always talk myself out of it, because where would I wear it? It's just so much fabric. I don't live close to my family anymore. It's not so simple to spend Lunar New Year's together, and I would probably have to special order a ton of very specific fabric. Just a whole bunch of excuses, but I love traditional clothing, and I really wanted to emphasize the variety in textures, designs, and styles between the 3 characters. So Fing is wearing a tangshan, which has a high collar and frog buttons, and despite the name, it's not a button that looks like a frog, but it's actually a button made from an ornamental braid or knot. Tangshan originate from Manchuria or northeast China. It's designed as a more modern and fashionable version of the riding jackets worn by the horsemen from that region. region. Io and Exodus are wearing more traditional hanfu, which actually hanfu is quite the umbrella term. Believe it or not, it just means traditional Han-style Chinese clothing, the Han dynasty being located in the easternmost side of China, south of the Manchuria region. Hanfu started out as quite gender neutral, consisting of either a paofu, which is a long robe, or a ru, which is more like a jacket as the upper garment, and a chun, which is a skirt-like lower garment. The main defining feature of this style was the use of silks. As styles and ideals changed over time, various additions to the clothing were made to accentuate certain features, such as sashes to bring in the waist, curved lapels, and also switching from just having skirts to also including pants. In the majority of China, a style called Zhaoling Yurin was adopted. This is specifically wrapping the right side of the robe and then the left side. This was initially used to encourage right-handed habits in the era of left-handedness being considered unlucky and uncivilized, but now this action is more closely linked to the yin-yang theory, where the left lapel symbolizes life and the right symbolizes death, to where the left crossing over the right is considered the clothing of the living, suppressing the yin or death. As for the headgear that Io is wearing, wide-brimmed veiled hats originate from northwestern China. These hats or mili were worn by men to protect themselves from the sun and sandstorms. This was eventually adopted across China, but ended up being more heavily featured in women's fashion and used in the social custom of women having to cover their faces when they were traveling. For travel practicalities of riding on horseback, the veils were shortened from full body to just covering the face in a style that was called weimao, but the practice of it being used as a social requirement eventually fell out of date as women climbed in social status and more open and tolerant societies came to the forefront. And in modern days, wide-brimmed and veils hat are either used as protection from the sun as its original purpose, or just for aesthetics because it's a really cool hat. I guess I should have apologized before I did my info dumping, but retroactively, I don't speak Chinese, I'm not a historian, and I'm just someone who loves traditional clothing and has a tendency to go down rabbit holes of information on the internet. So I do apologize for any of my weird pronunciations, or if I've maybe misunderstood or misspoken about any of these traditional clothings or their purposes. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any other insights, because learning is a great thing. And you know what? What is the comment section for besides telling people in the video how wrong they are? That is a joke. 99% of my comments that I've received over my YouTube career has been very, very nice, very, very sweet, and I appreciate you all very, very much. Speaking of you guys making me happy, we are super close to 880 subscribers as of recording this, which in itself is super close to 900, and I cannot thank you enough for the support you are all giving me. Liking, sharing, commenting, it all helps a ton, and I appreciate you. But back to the art. In this piece, I'm trying out a couple of different techniques that I don't usually use while drawing in my painterly style. The first is using the freehand lasso tool to work and shade different sections. From what little I've seen on the internet about other art programs is that the lasso tool works a little bit more intuitively. Just as a disclaimer, I love Krita, I've never used anything else, but I always feel like I can never get the auto select lasso tool to work the way that I want it to, no matter how much I mess with the settings. However, occasionally I see other artists just freehand select section of their art using the lasso tool, which is what I do in this drawing. I don't feel like I have very steady or accurate hands, which is why I've stepped a little bit away from line art as an art style, and freehanding sections with the lasso gives me quite a similar anxiety. And just to clarify the technical jargon, just in case someone who is not used to art programs doesn't know, when I say I'm using the lasso tool, I'm basically just selecting a small section of my art with a dotted outline, and it'll only allow me to draw within that dotted outline. This is great for creating very sharp edges, bright highlights, and not letting it blend into the background or other elements of the painting. It's definitely a technique that I think suits my art style very well, and I don't think my hands actually have as much of an impact as I am anxious that they do. I do, however, think straight up I'm not used to using this method. It is something that I want to try more often, but it does always take a bit of extra energy to add a new style or skill set to your usual art flow. The second thing I'm doing differently than usual is that instead of adding another layer for color dodge or multiply or what have you, Krita lets you turn your brush specifically into that feature up here. So instead of adding a layer and merging it down and adding a layer and merging it down, I just went in with the brush instead, and it worked surprisingly well. I say surprisingly, but really it just did what it's supposed to do. I'm not sure if it saved me a ton of time having to switch my brush between the different settings, but it was kind of cool. I really like the effect it gave me, especially in the eyes of the lion, which you get to see much later in the process. Speaking of new things, this is the first Lunar New Year drawing that I've done where none of the featured characters have red or even pink skin tones, which has always been something that I worry about when setting the scene, because even if my drawing style is relatively low contrast and soft, we don't want the characters just muddling and blending into each other. And that's kind of difficult when beforehand you already know that everyone is supposed to be dressed in very similar shades of red, because obviously all of the characters are going to be manifesting luck and wealth in the new year. But let's say your closet is a lot like mine, which is to say a lot of black clothing. What are some other ways you can manifest luck, or at the very least not anger your Asian aunties? If you don't have red, yellow is also an acceptable color for wealth and luck. Unfortunately for me and all y'all out there, black and white need to be kept to a minimum, as these are considered unlucky colors. But if your wardrobe is not quite up to par, maybe your kitchen is. Eating a lot of different kinds of food is great luck on the Lunar New Year. Different foods have different blessings associated with them. For example, dumplings or spring rolls symbolize wealth, and fried flour-coated peanuts symbolize vitality, which is very unfortunate for our friends with peanut allergies, because I'm pretty sure that eating peanuts would be the opposite of vitality for them, but you know what? I'm no expert. So let's say you have an all-black closet and you also have a peanut allergy. Another way to bring in luck for the New Year's is to decorate your house with kumquat trees. It can be a little difficult to get a kumquat tree on such short notice, I understand. So instead, take some little clementine oranges and place them in the most tree-like indoor plant that you own, and this will make a sufficient substitute. I actually don't speak on behalf of all people who celebrate Lunar New Year traditions for that one. That's just what my grandma has been doing for as long as I can remember, and if it works for her, let's hope it works for us. But with that, we come to the end of our 2024 Lunar New Year drawing. I do want to say on this little ticket thing that is hanging by Ayo's lantern, I was gonna write...
The woman was too stunned to speak.
I was gonna write gōng hei fa choi, but instead I just hid my signature and some plum blossoms in there because I'm not gonna lie, I got a little lazy towards the end of working on this drawing. And yet, I do always feel that the Lunar New Year drawing brings out the best in me. I'm not trying to be uppity or anything, don't get me wrong. This was a 6-hour process. But at the end of these drawings, I always love the composition, the limited color palette. It just makes me so happy. But with that, gōng hei fa choi, everybody. May you have a happy and prosperous year ahead of you, and let's hope the changes, challenges, and opportunities that may come our way are full of growth and good things. But who knows? Not me.